At 32, I'm Amy, and for 2 decades, my relatives considered me the peculiar outsider in their boisterous, energetic household. The memory of their mockery at our dinner table when I turned 12 remains vivid. They branded me strange for preferring solitary reading. Those cutting remarks took root, molding and crushing my spirit until I constructed something beyond their wildest expectations. Eventually, they appeared on my doorstep, attempting to claim ownership of what belonged solely to me. Has your loved one's lack of faith in you ever wounded you? Let me know your location in the comments below. If this resonates with your experience, please show support by liking and subscribing for more authentic narratives. At 12 years old, I lay beneath our massive oak tree, completely absorbed in tales of distant lands. The summer cookout was in full swing around me. Twinkling lights decorated the picnic tables while the aroma of grilled vegetables and meat filled the humid air. Jessica, my confident 16-year-old sister, was playing frisbee with Ryan, my 14-year-old brother, their cheerful sounds piercing through the adult conversations. Looking up briefly, I wished I could participate, yet my fingers remained fixed to the pages, my pulse quickening with the narrative's excitement. Mom had exceeded expectations, arranging trays of creamy potato salad and pitcher after pitcher of fresh lemonade, still wearing her cooking apron while socializing with the neighbors. Charles, my father, commanded the grill area, turning the patties while his booming laughter resonated above everyone else. Watching him like that filled me with admiration. He seemed so self-assured, naturally becoming the focal point of any social gathering. To my young eyes, he appeared towering, capable of repairing anything and bringing joy to anyone's face. I longed for him to view me with the same regard he showed Jessica and Ryan, confident and comfortable in their own presence. Tucking a loose hair strand behind my ear, I flipped to the next page, allowing the story to recapture my attention. Jessica's sharp voice suddenly cut through my concentration. Amy, what's your obsession with hiding behind books? Come participate like any typical child. Though her words carried a teasing edge, they struck me like a physical blow. I managed a forced smile, hoping she'd move on to another topic. However, Ryan approached with the frisbee, adding his voice to hers. Seriously, what's your problem? You'll grow roots if you stay planted there much longer. The nearby children giggled, causing my face to flush with embarrassment. I muttered something about completing my chapter, but Jessica wasn't finished. She dropped onto the lawn, her ponytail bouncing as she spoke. You're such an oddball, Amy. No surprise you lack friends. My throat constricted. I yearned to retort, to explain that my stories contained countless friendships, but speech failed me. Instead, I clutched my book tighter, desperately wishing I could vanish into its pages. Then Dad's voice thundered from the cooking area. Amy believes she's superior to the rest of us, constantly lost in her private universe. He chuckled as though making a harmless joke, but the gathered guests joined his laughter, making my stomach churn with nausea. I gazed at him, searching for a knowing wink or signal that he meant no harm, but he'd already returned his attention to the cooking, exchanging jokes with Uncle Ray. My hero, my father, had just transformed me into the evening's entertainment. Rising on unsteady legs, I retreated toward the house, leaving the laughter behind me. The kitchen offered refuge, silent except for the refrigerator's gentle humming. I collapsed onto a stool, still gripping my book, staring at the countertop while my finger traced patterns in the worn linoleum. Was my difference really so pronounced? I cherished my family, their energy and disorder, yet I'd never discovered how to belong within it. Jessica commanded attention like a star, Ryan possessed natural charm, and I remained simply the silent one, forever the outsider. The screen door's creak announced Mrs. Clara's entrance, our neighbor with compassionate eyes, carrying an empty dessert plate. She paused upon seeing me. Everything all right, dear? Her gentle voice suggested she already understood my distress. I gave a small nod, but tears threatened, and she placed her dish aside before sitting across from me. They don't intend harm. People often tease what they cannot comprehend. She reached into her purse, producing a small leather journal and sliding it toward me. Record your feelings, Amy. It will help you discover your voice. I accepted the journal, its smooth cover beneath my fingertips, and whispered my gratitude. Clara smiled before departing, her footsteps fading as the celebration sounds returned. Opening the journal, I faced blank pages and felt my chest grow heavy. Yet something else awakened too. An unnamed spark of determination. I seized a pen from the counter and began writing. I'm not strange. I'm not mistaken. I will demonstrate that I'm sufficient. The words felt bold, larger than my current self, but as I wrote them, I believed them momentarily. Outside, Jessica's laughter rang out again, sharp and thoughtless. I closed the journal, my heart still aching, but that spark remained undimmed. I couldn't explain how, but I would prove their judgment wrong. At 16, 4 years had passed, and I navigated Lincoln High's bustling corridors, my backpack weighted with textbooks and private aspirations. I'd grown accustomed to remaining invisible at home, but school offered something different. I excelled there. Leading my English class, my essays displayed on teachers' bulletin boards by educators who recognized my potential. Still, an invisible burden followed me everywhere, the echo of family ridicule making me question my adequacy. On a crisp October evening, the essay contest letter arrived. I'd submitted a piece about a girl discovering courage in a small town, investing my soul into every sentence. Opening the envelope and learning I'd claimed first place in the regional competition made my hands tremble. The prize included admission to a summer writing program in Chicago, an opportunity to learn from professional authors. I could barely breathe imagining myself surrounded by people who shared my passion for words. That evening at dinner, silverware clinked against dishes in the familiar silence. Mom had prepared her renowned meatloaf, the kitchen filled with the aroma of onions and sweet glaze. Jessica, now 20 and visiting from college, described her sorority's autumn formal, her hands animated as she detailed her dress selection. Ryan, 18 and a senior, boasted about scoring the game-winning touchdown the previous week. Dad listened attentively while Mom beamed, passing the mashed potatoes around. I waited for a conversational break, my heart hammering, the letter folded in my pocket. Clearing my throat, I spoke. I won an essay contest. First place. My voice emerged quieter than intended, but I continued. There's this writing program in Chicago. I could attend with your permission. I slid the letter across the table, my fingers trembling. Jessica snorted without glancing up from her meal. An essay? Like some school assignment. Ryan grinned, leaning back in his chair. Here's to Amy's little surprise. He raised his soda glass in a mock celebration, prompting Jessica's laughter, her eyes sparkling with amusement. Mom glanced at the letter before setting it aside, her smile disappearing. Writing's pleasant, Amy, but it lacks practicality. You need to concentrate on something that leads somewhere. I swallowed hard, my face burning. I looked to Dad, hoping for any supportive word. He picked up the letter, scanning it briefly, then set it down with a shrug. Why squander money on that? You're not exceptional, Amy. You're intelligent, certainly, but don't develop grandiose notions. His words struck like a physical blow, stealing my breath. I stared at my plate, the meatloaf becoming blurry as my eyes burned. The table continued. Ryan launching into a coach story, Jessica adding her own tales. I pushed back my chair, mumbling about homework, and escaped upstairs. In my bedroom, I shut the door and collapsed onto my bed, the letter crumpled in my fist. Not exceptional. Those words circled my mind, each repetition cutting deeper. I wanted to shout, to tell them how wrong they were, but all I could manage was curling up, embracing my pillow as the chest pain intensified. The following day, I sought out Mr. Gregory, my English teacher, in his after-school classroom. He sat grading papers, his desk chaotic with coffee mugs and books. He'd encouraged my contest entry, always insisting my stories possessed soul. I explained what happened, my voice breaking. He leaned forward, his eyes kind yet firm. Amy, you don't require their permission to excel. Apply for that program. I'll help you navigate it. That evening, alone in my room, I completed the application, my pen racing across the forms. When it requested a parental signature, I hesitated, my heart pounding. Then I forged Mom's name, my hand remaining steady despite the guilt twisting my stomach. I sealed the envelope, recognizing I was crossing boundaries, but I couldn't retreat. I had to demonstrate I exceeded their jokes, surpassed the girl they dismissed. As I tucked the envelope into my backpack, quiet determination settled over me. This represented my opportunity, and I refused to let them destroy it. At 20, I was a junior at Ohio State, inhabiting a cramped dormitory room that perpetually smelled of instant noodles and aging books. College served as my refuge, a place where I could breathe freely, where my words held significance. I'd immersed myself in my creative writing major, spending countless late nights in the library, creating stories that felt like fragments of my essence. Yet every thought of returning home caused my stomach to knot. The Chicago summer writing program had transformed me, offering a glimpse of a world where I wasn't considered the strange one. Still, the sting of my family's rejection lingered like an unhealed wound I couldn't ignore. Thanksgiving break arrived, and I'd returned to our small Ohio town, hearing the familiar gravel crunch beneath my boots as I approached the driveway. The house radiated warm illumination, the scent of roasted turkey and pumpkin pie drifting out as I entered. Mom worked in the kitchen, her hair secured back, stirring gravy with a wooden spoon. Dad occupied his recliner while a football game blared from the television, and Jessica and Ryan lounged on the couch, scrolling their phones. For a brief moment, I allowed myself hope that this visit might differ, that perhaps they'd finally see me, the person who was beginning to believe in herself. Dinner brought chaos, plates clattering, everyone speaking simultaneously. I sat at the table's end, picking at green beans, awaiting a chance to share something meaningful. Jessica dominated conversation about her new marketing firm internship, her voice bright with pride. Ryan, now employed at an auto shop, bragged about repairing a vintage Mustang. Mom and Dad absorbed every word, their faces illuminated as if hearing universal secrets. Taking a deep breath, my fingers tightening around my fork, I spoke. I've been creating a novel. It's about a girl who discovers her place in a world that doesn't understand her. I paused, hoping they'd inquire further. The table quieted momentarily, and I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd listen. Jessica shattered the silence with cutting laughter. A novel? You mean like those sentimental stories you used to scribble? She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. Amy, you'll remain impoverished forever chasing that nonsense. Ryan smirked, piling more stuffing onto his plate. Yeah, find a real job, sis. Maybe you could write instruction manuals for my shop. He chuckled, and Mom shot him a disapproving look but remained silent. My chest constricted, yet I persisted, desperate to make them understand. It's not merely a pastime. I had a story published in the campus journal last month. I'm committed to this. My voice cracked at the end, and I despised how small it sounded. Dad leaned back, wiping his mouth with a napkin. He began recounting a story about my 9-year-old self, how I'd retreat to my room with books while everyone else played outside. Our little recluse, he said, grinning as if it were endearing. Mom laughed, shaking her head. Some patterns never change, Amy. The table erupted in chuckles, my cousins joining in, and I felt myself shrinking, vanishing right there before them. I stared at my plate, the food growing cold, my throat burning. I wanted to scream, to tell them they were mistaken, that I was no longer the child they'd ridiculed. But words wouldn't come. Instead, I stood, my chair scraping the floor, and mumbled something about needing fresh air. I grabbed my coat and slipped out the back door, November's chill hitting my face as I stepped onto the porch. The stars appeared sharp in the sky, the air carrying scents of wood smoke and frost. I wrapped my arms around myself, my breath visible in the cold. My phone buzzed, and I pulled it out to see a text from Sophia, my college friend who'd become my lifeline. How's home? You okay? I stared at the screen, tears blurring the words. Sophia's family differed greatly, warm and boisterous in ways that elevated rather than demolished. I typed back a quick "I'm fine," but my fingers shook. I wasn't fine. I was unraveling under the pressure of their words, heavier than ever before. I leaned against the porch railing, my mind racing. I'd invested years attempting to prove my worth, channeling my pain into stories that were beginning to matter. But sitting at that table, hearing their laughter, I realized this transcended mere teasing. It had become something colder, something determined to keep me diminished. My hands clenched into fists, the ache in my chest sharpening. I refused to let them define me any longer. Standing there alone in the darkness, I couldn't shake the fear that I'd never escape their influence. At 25, I survived as a freelance writer in a tiny Chicago apartment, the type with groaning floors and a radiator that hissed throughout the night. My days involved pitching articles, pursuing overdue payments, and stealing moments to work on my novel. Yet I cherished it. Every word I crafted felt like progress toward something greater, a life where I could stand proudly. Still, returning home always felt like entering a snare, and Dad's 60th birthday celebration proved no different. I'd driven 6 hours back to Ohio, my aging hatchback rattling the entire journey, a carefully wrapped gift occupying the passenger seat. The house overflowed with guests when I arrived, music pouring from the living room, a blend of Motown and classic rock that Dad adored. Balloons floated against the ceiling while the dining table strained under trays of barbecue ribs, cornbread, and an enormous chocolate cake. Neighbors and relatives mingled, their voices creating a warm murmur. Jessica, now 29, held court near the fireplace, displaying her engagement ring to a cluster of ants. Ryan, 27, leaned against the wall with a beer, charming a group with tales from his new sales representative position. Mom fluttered about, refilling beverages, her smile broad but weary. Dad sat at the celebration's center, his laughter the loudest, absorbing all the attention. I slipped into the kitchen, placing my gift, a leather-bound journal with his initials embossed on the cover, on the counter. I'd spent weeks searching for it, saving from my modest earnings, hoping he'd treasure it. I smoothed my sweater, feeling misplaced among the crowd, and joined the festivities, gripping a glass of punch. Ryan spotted me and grinned too broadly. There's our author, still embracing the impoverished artist lifestyle. His tone seemed playful, but it cut deeply, and several people chuckled. I forced laughter, my face heating, and moved toward Dad, hoping for a genuine moment. The gift opening occurred after the meal. Everyone assembled in the living room, the air thick with cigarette smoke and perfume. Dad unwrapped Jessica's present first, an elegant watch that gleamed under the lights. He whistled, sliding it on, and she radiated happiness, basking in the praise. Ryan's gift was aged bourbon, and Dad patted his back, joking about saving it for special occasions. My turn arrived, and I handed him the journal, my heart lodged in my throat. I thought you could record your stories. You always tell the most captivating ones. He opened it, nodded, and placed it on the coffee table. Nice, Amy. Thank you. His voice was emotionless, distracted, already turning to the next gift. My stomach plummeted, but I told myself it was acceptable, that he'd appreciate it later. Then Mom spoke up, her voice carrying over the chatter. Amy, why can't you emulate your siblings? Jessica has a wedding to organize, Ryan's advancing his career, and you're still pursuing fantasies. Stop squandering your life. The room fell silent, eyes shifting to me, some curious, others pitying. My glass trembled in my hand, punch sloshing. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing emerged. Jessica smirked, sipping her wine, while Ryan shook his head like I was hopeless. Dad didn't glance up, simply continued unwrapping golf gloves from Uncle Ray. I felt suffocated, their words crushing me. My cousin Natalie caught my eye from across the room, her face soft with concern. She moved toward me, but I brushed past her, too wounded to accept comfort. I grabbed my coat and slipped out the front door before anyone could intervene. The night was frigid, streetlights casting elongated shadows on the lawn. I climbed into my vehicle, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. Mom's voice echoed. "Squandering your life." It wasn't just her words. It was the truth they contained, the truth my family had always embraced. To them I was nothing, a dreamer who'd never measure up. I started the engine, tears streaming down my face, and pulled away, the house shrinking in my rearview mirror. I didn't know my destination, only that I couldn't remain. Every laugh, every slight, every moment they'd made me feel insignificant came flooding back. I realized this wasn't merely a difficult evening. This was their true nature, who they'd always been. I was finished trying to change that. At 30, I stood at the threshold of a new chapter. My debut novel had just reached bookstores, a quiet release beginning to create ripples through book blogs and local retailers. I'd invested everything into it. Every late night, every doubt, every scar from my family's dismissal. Holding that book with my name on the cover felt like evidence I wasn't the failure they believed me to be. When the family reunion invitation arrived for a lakeside park in Ohio, I accepted despite the ache in my gut. Perhaps I thought they'd view me differently now. The park buzzed with summer energy, the lake sparkling under July sun, picnic tables draped in red checkered fabric. Children chased each other across the grass, their shrieks mixing with the sizzle of hot dogs on portable grills. Aunts and uncles clustered in lawn chairs, sipping iced tea while Mom fussed over spreads of macaroni salad and fruit platters. Dad stood by the water, tossing a football with Ryan, his silver hair catching the light. Jessica, radiant in a sundress, chatted with cousins, her laughter bright and effortless. I arrived late, my novel tucked under my arm, a signed copy for Dad, my final fragile hope that he'd feel proud. I mingled awkwardly, clutching a soda, the book heavy in my tote bag. When food was served, I found a spot at a crowded table, the chatter loud around me. Ryan, now 33, boasted about his new condominium while Jessica, 34, shared destination wedding plans. I listened, smiling politely, waiting for a moment to share my news. Finally, as plates were cleared, I pulled out the book and placed it before Dad, my hands steady despite my racing heart. "I wrote this. It's performing well. I signed it for you." Jessica glanced over, her eyebrows rising. "You wrote a book? Who would read that?" Her tone seemed light, but it sliced through me, and several cousins snickered. Ryan reached across the table, snatching the book before Dad could touch it. He flipped it open, then tossed it onto a pile of napkins, grinning. "Looks like quality coaster material." The table laughed, my face burned, but I kept my eyes on Dad, willing him to speak. He picked up the book, turning it over, his expression unreadable. "Nice hobby, Amy," he said finally, setting it down without opening it. He turned to Ryan, asking about the football game, and conversation rolled on as if I hadn't spoken. My chest tightened with familiar ache, but this time something else stirred, a spark of anger I couldn't swallow. I stood, my chair scraping the grass, and the table went quiet. "Why do you consistently tear me down?" My voice shook, louder than intended, and every head turned. "I've worked incredibly hard, and you act like it's meaningless, like I'm meaningless." My eyes locked on Dad, then Jessica, then Ryan. Their faces showed a mixture of shock and discomfort. Mom frowned, setting down her drink. "Amy, you're overly sensitive. Sit down. Don't create a scene." Her words were like gasoline on fire. "A scene? You've mocked me my entire life. Called me weird, useless, a dreamer who'd never succeed." I pointed at the book, my hand trembling. "That's my heart, and you discarded it like garbage." The park seemed to freeze, even the children pausing their games, eyes on me. Jessica rolled her eyes, muttering something to Ryan, and Dad sighed like I was exhausting him. I couldn't breathe. I turned, grabbing my bag, and started for the parking area, my sandals sinking into soft earth. Natalie called after me, her voice gentle. "Amy, wait. Let's talk." I shook my head, tears blurring the path ahead. I didn't want conversation. I wanted to scream, to make them feel the weight of every word they'd hurled at me. My car came into sight, keys jangling in my hand, when I realized what I'd just accomplished. I'd finally spoken up, but it didn't feel like liberation. It felt like breaking, like everything I'd held together was crumbling, and I didn't know what remained. I reached my vehicle, summer heat radiating from the hood, my breath ragged as I fumbled with the keys. Behind me, the reunion's noise faded, but Natalie's footsteps crunched on gravel, her voice pleading, "Amy, please return." They didn't intend it that way. I spun around, my eyes stinging, ready to tell her to leave me alone. But then I saw them, Jessica, Ryan, Mom, Dad, and several cousins spilling from the park, watching me like I was some kind of exhibition. Jessica stepped forward, arms crossed, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're making this entirely about yourself, Amy. Always playing the victim. You think you're superior to us with your little book." My jaw dropped, air sucked from me. The crowd murmured and Ryan jumped in, his tone mocking. "Yeah, what's next, Hollywood? Get over yourself." A few laughs rippled through the group, and I felt exposed, every insecurity laid bare. Mom pushed through, her face tight with irritation. "You've embarrassed us sufficiently, Amy. Go calm down and stop behaving like a child." Her words were a blade slicing through the final thread of hope I'd maintained. I looked at Dad standing behind her, hands in his pockets. He met my eyes briefly, then looked away, his silence more deafening than anything they'd said. Get at it, dismissed it, just as they'd dismissed me for 20 years. But this was worse. This wasn't teasing or ignorance. It was deliberate, a public demolition to keep me in my place. I wanted to run back, grab the book, and thrust it in their faces, but my feet wouldn't move. My hands shook, keys slipping in my sweaty palm. Then my phone buzzed, a notification breaking the moment. I glanced down, my vision blurry, and saw an email from my agent. "Your book's gone viral. A celebrity tweeted about it. We're discussing film deals, Amy. Millions." I froze, the word surreal against the sting of my family's voices still ringing in my ears. Millions. Success they couldn't imagine. Success I'd earned alone. But standing there with their eyes on me, it didn't feel like victory. It felt hollow, like the ground had split open and I was falling. Months later, that email materialized into a $400 million deal. My life transformed overnight. I purchased a house in Colorado, a sprawling property with mountain views, far from Ohio's suffocating memories. I was still reeling when Jessica called, her voice syrupy with congratulations, asking for a loan in the next breath. Ryan texted, joking about crashing at my mansion. Dad left a voicemail, his tone warm but hollow. "We're proud, Amy. Come home." It was his first expression of pride, and it made my skin crawl. I invited them to Colorado. I'm not sure why. Perhaps to see if they'd changed, perhaps to prove I'd won. They arrived, piling out of a rental van, their luggage thumping onto my driveway. The house gleamed behind me, all glass and cedar, a testament to everything I'd built. Jessica entered first, her eyes scanning the high ceilings before scoffing. "This place is so cold and empty." Ryan elbowed past, demanding a tour, his boots tracking dirt on my floors. Mom ran her fingers over the marble counter, muttering about how she could adapt to this. Dad clapped a hand on my shoulder, his grin wide. "You owe us for raising you, kid. This is our house too." I stood in my own foyer, their voices echoing off the walls, and felt the world tilt. Our house. They'd spent decades tearing me down, and now they were claiming my life as theirs. My heart pounded, a mixture of rage and disbelief as Jessica started snapping selfies in my living room. Ryan opened my refrigerator like he owned it, and Dad discussed family vacations here. I opened my mouth, my voice barely a whisper. "Get out." They froze, staring at me, but I couldn't stop. "Get out of my house now." I moved to the door, my hands trembling as I turned the lock, their protests rising behind me. Jessica's voice was shrill, Ryan's angry, Mom's pleading, but it all blurred into noise. I stood there, my back to them. The deadbolts clicked, the loudest sound I'd ever heard. My chest heaved, tears streaming, and I realized I wasn't just locking them out. I was locking out 20 years of pain. I didn't know if I'd ever open that door again. Weeks after barring my family from my home, I remained haunted by the sound of that deadbolt engaging. I'd stood in my Colorado foyer, hands trembling, their voices fading as they pounded on the door. Jessica's shrill accusations, Ryan's angry demands, Mom's desperate pleas, Dad's silence. It all replayed endlessly, a loop I couldn't escape. I was 30, living in a house most people could only dream of, with a $400 million deal that had transformed my existence. Yet I felt like I was drowning. I'd constructed this world alone, and still their rejection possessed the power to unravel me. I spent days pacing my hardwood floors, the mountain views outside my windows doing little to calm the internal storm. I'd glance at my phone, half expecting another call from them, another demand disguised as affection. But silence prevailed, and that quiet was worse. It made me question everything. Had I been too severe? Was I wrong to exclude them? The girl who'd spent 20 years craving their approval still existed within me, whispering that I'd gone too far. I knew I needed protection. Not just my heart but everything I'd built. So I scheduled an appointment with Lisa, a lawyer Sophia had recommended. Her office was in downtown Boulder, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Rockies like artwork. Lisa was in her 40s with sharp eyes and a calm voice that put me at ease. I sat across from her, hands clasped tightly, and told her everything. Decades of mockery, their entitlement when they appeared, the way they called my house theirs. My voice broke when I reached Dad's words. "You owe us for raising you." Lisa leaned forward, her pen tapping her notepad. "You need boundaries, Amy. Legal ones. They might attempt to claim a piece of your success, especially with a deal this magnitude." She suggested a formal no-contact letter, something to clarify I was finished, to protect my assets and peace. The idea felt heavy, final, like signing away the last fragment of family I possessed. But sitting there, the leather chair creaking beneath me, I realized I had no choice. I'd spent too long allowing them to define me. That evening, I sat at my kitchen island, a single lamp casting warm light over the granite. I opened my laptop and began writing the letter, my fingers hesitant initially. "Dear Jessica, Ryan, Mom, Dad," I typed, then paused, my throat tight. I didn't want to sound angry or bitter. I wanted clarity, to say what I'd never had the courage to express. For 20 years you've dismissed me, mocked my dreams, and made me feel like an outsider. When you came to my home you didn't see me. You saw what you could take. I'm choosing myself now. Please don't contact me again. Each word was a release, weightlifting, but it hurt too, like carving out a piece of my heart. I wrote about specific moments. Not the ones I'd shouted about at the reunion, but quieter ones they'd probably forgotten. The time Jessica called my stories childish. The time Ryan said I'd never amount to anything. The time Mom compared me to them and found me lacking. The time Dad ignored my first published story. I didn't accuse. I simply laid it bare, letting truth speak for itself. When I finished, I printed the letter. The printers hummed, the only sound in the house. I held the pages, 4 of them single-spaced, and read them again. My hands didn't shake this time. I felt a clarity I hadn't known before, a sense that I was finally claiming my own story. I folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope, and set it on the counter. Not ready to mail it yet, but knowing I would. The next day, Sophia visited, her suitcase bumping against the doorframe as she hugged me tightly. We sat on my deck, the air crisp with early fall, sipping coffee as the mountains loomed in the distance. She listened as I told her about the letter, her eyes soft but fierce. "You're not that child anymore, Amy. You're building something real. Don't let them take that from you." Her words sank in, and I felt a spark of something new. Not just anger or hurt, but purpose. We began discussing what I could do next, not just to protect myself but to give back. I'd been considering the children like me, the ones who felt invisible, who needed someone to believe in their dreams. What if I started a non-profit? I said, my voice growing steadier. A place for young writers to find their voice, to feel seen. Sophia's face lit up, and we spent hours brainstorming, sketching ideas on napkins. We called it Pen and Hope, a name that felt like a promise. As the sun dipped below the peaks, casting golden light over the valley, I looked at the envelope on my counter through the glass doors. Mailing it would be the first step, not just away from them but toward something bigger. I wasn't sure what their reaction would be, but for the first time I didn't need to know. I was ready to write my own ending, and that felt like power. The envelope remained on my counter for 2 days, its white edges stark against the dark granite. I'd walk past it, my eyes catching the names. Jessica, Ryan, Mom, Dad written in my careful handwriting, and feel a tug in my chest, part fear, part freedom. Sophia had returned to Chicago, her visit leaving me with a fire I hadn't felt before. Pen and Hope was more than an idea now. It was a mission, a way to transform my pain into something that could elevate others. But first I had to close the door on my past. I mailed the letter on a Tuesday, dropping it into a blue mailbox outside the post office, the metal clank echoing in the crisp morning air. My heart raced as I released it, but my steps felt lighter walking back to my car. I'd spent 20 years waiting for my family to see me, but that letter was my line in the sand. I wasn't begging for their love anymore. I was choosing me. Back home I threw myself into Pen and Hope. I rented a small office in Boulder, a cozy space with exposed brick walls and a skylight that let in soft natural light. I met with Karen, a local nonprofit consultant, who helped me file paperwork and draft a mission statement. "We want to empower young writers," I told her, my voice steady. "Kids who feel like they don't belong, who need a place to be heard." Karen nodded, scribbling notes, and I felt a surge of pride. This was real, something I was constructing from the foundation up. The launch event took shape over weeks, planned for a local bookstore with tall shelves and